What's up, everyone? Today we're going to be rebuilding the Thermoquad carburetor. Now, before we get into that, I want to go over kind of what is going on and why we're doing it. Now, originally, this Thermoquad came off of that truck right there, which of course, originally was a 318. When I picked it up, it had this on it, like I said, and it ran great. Unfortunately, when the engine pretty much just fell apart. It had sat for so long, it had tons of miles on it. But yeah, you know, things happen. We progress. So I was always told that these were the thermo bogs and you don't want these. So naturally, what did I do? I switched it out to this Edelbrock. And I also switched the engine over to a 360. Now the 360 was a wonderful engine. This carburetor gave me nothing but hassle. Every time I was working on something, this thing was the reason why I had an issue. Eventually I went back to the Thermoquad and it ran fine. So, you know, brings us to the Holly. The reason why we're not using the Holly, one, it's only 600 CFM. Also, which was brought up, this is not a spread bore carburetor. The intake manifold is, and didn't have an adapter plate on it. So that's a story on its own. However, I have nothing against Holly. Great carburetors. The other, however, is we are going down to one of the masters of the Thermoquad himself. So I am really excited to learn a little bit about these. And I've done a lot of research about which one we have specifically. Now, I assumed that this was meant for a 318 because it came off of a 318. So when I ordered the rebuild kit, I gave it what it was and they gave me the kit. Fortunately, I looked at inside which one this one right here is compared to the kits. And this is not from a 1981 Dodge with a 318. In fact, this is the 9036S, which the best I can actually find is this is off of a 1975, 76, maybe a 77 440. And after measuring the primaries, now the secondaries on all these Thermoquads, as far as I'm aware of this particular one, they're all the same. It comes down to the primaries. The primaries on these come in two flavors. This one happens to be the 1.5 inch, which means this is 850 CFM. This is a big boy. And it's also one of the most complicated carburetors that I've ever looked up. As far as the internals go, this has been rebuilt once at one time. And as far as everything goes, the settings for, you know, everything seem to be right. You have your, everything seems good. However, I say however, I don't know how many times I'll say it, but if I'm bringing this down and we're going to be slapping it on this engine, I want to make sure this thing is ready to go. As far as I can tell, I don't see any cracks in the actual thermoset plastic, the resin that it's made out of. But I guess we're going to find out as we dig into this. And I'm very excited to learn more about this carburetor. I've always been really a fuel injection guy, and there's just something about carburetors that it's very interesting to me, something that I'm not too good with. So it's going to be a very good learning experience going down to Tony's and Nick's, and maybe we can get this thing dialed in after we dyno with one of the known good carburetors. So without more talking and stuff like that, let's do more doing. Let's go ahead, start tearing this down, get this thing cleaned up, all new gaskets, fuel pump, everything. We have a lot to do today, so let's stop talking and get doing. So we're down on the actually my table saw off-feed table. I was thinking about the upstairs dining room table, you know, do it like everyone else, but I was kind of thinking about it. There's gonna be a lot of chemicals being used here, and I'd rather just do it down in the basement. So the first thing we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to pull some of these linkages off so that we can separate the individual parts. This really is like a layered cake of complexity. So I would like to say that this is straightforward, but I recommend definitely reading the instructions before you tear it down, unless you're really good at Thermoquads, which you're probably not watching this video, unless you want to watch me just totally butcher this thing, which I hope I don't, because I have a little bit of emotional attachment to this particular one. So let's go ahead, dig into this, and you know, let's learn together on how to rebuild a 75, 76, I think 77, something like that Thermoquad, which I don't know how different they vary throughout the years, but most of the settings on here, like I was saying, it's pretty good. We have a little bit of play, you know, and a few things that we want to kind of address, but most of that stuff is just going to get replaced anyway, so no big deal. What else? no, nothing really else to do. Just you know, I'm gonna push these in as far as I can get them, and then measure each one of the turns, or count each one of the turns, and write it down so that I know when I pull it back out, it's in a decent area. I'm really hoping that we do get an opportunity with Nick to see if we can't get this thing dialed in on the engine, and then we could just plop it off. That way, you know, we know what this whole setup is, but I know we have a cam to break in, so we're definitely going to have to use one of Nick's carburetors to break in the cam. You know, you don't want to damage the cam because we're trying out a carburetor that some Joe Schmo put back together. So anyways, oh, one interesting thing, this doesn't have a spot for it to be what do you call it, electronic choke. This is like super old school, which is fine. I prefer the manual chokes over the electric chokes. That means we'll just have to hook up a choke cable into the satellite, which to me, not a big deal. We'll figure that out at a later date, but yeah, let's go ahead, tear this down, and see what needs to be replaced. We have a bunch of different gaskets that will fit variations of this generation. And one big thing is when we change the plenum side of the intake right here, we're gonna chop a little bit out of this old intake. But we're also gonna add a 1-inch spacer. I don't know what all that will entail, but when we get down to Tony's, he's gonna walk us through exactly what our layout's gonna be. Because once again, I am learning with you guys about this 318. This is something I'm very excited. I always like learning things. So anyways, let's talk. Let's tear this down and see how it looks inside. Before we get into this, make sure when you take these off, try doing your best to alleviate the pressure evenly, because I hear taking these apart improperly can warp the resin in here. So we want to avoid that. I do have something so we can make sure that it is actually flat and true when it's all said and done, but you know, let's do ourselves a favor and not destroy it before we even get started. So let's go ahead. Remember, do something probably similar to how you would take apart a tire. So we'll see what happens. You know, if it warps it, then I'm kind of screwed, and we don't want that. So the bolts are different lengths. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure them. We're going to make a little note in a notebook where each one of them goes, so that when we get these back out of the tumbler, we could just drop them back in, and we're not going to over tight because we put too big of a bolt there or too small of a bolt, whatever. So we're just going to make a note. That way we put it back together correctly. Seem to all be 3 inches except for this one right here, which actually came out to being 3 1/4. So no, 3 1/8, sorry, 3 1/8. So very easy to remember that. We'll just have to, you know, remember when we reinstall it, the long one goes there, but we'll have the note just in case. All right, so I did forget there was 2 bolts in there. So before you start really yarning on it, remember you have the 4 on the front, 4 in the back, and 2 in the center. But it does come right apart. Once you get those, The float bowls on this one, I was hoping this was old enough that it would actually have the actual metallic ones, not the plastic ones. But they look good. Matter of fact, oh, let's go ahead and I'll have to get that thing in the shaker there. Everything looks good. Actually, the gasket is really not in that bad a shape. I would venture to guess that this did not really need. It is pretty brittle though, so it was time for a rebuild. We're gonna try to keep all the pieces. We get the right gasket back on here. It looks like it's actually gonna be. What we got? Looks like it's this one right here, not this one, because we don't have the extra hole. So that's the gasket we're going to be needing right there. And we'll move on to the next part. As far as like up here, everything looks great. We'll clean all the individual holes. We'll make sure that we have flow through it. We'll set this down like right here for a second. As far as inside here, there's a couple things. We'll take, where did I put it? Oh, here it is. So this is actually a ruler for a machinist. So it's a machinist ruler. And you're going to want to make sure that we're flat all the way through. I mean, we have some buildup from carbon or something right there, but we'll completely just scrub it down with just cleaner. We won't have to use any abrasives. I think we're actually in really, really good shape. This is a good carburetor. Just getting it out so we can get to the bottom half is gonna. Oh, I see what we have to do. We have to take these. All right, so we'll keep tearing this down. But yeah, everything you do with this, remember it's old. Be gentle with it. You don't want to damage it. So let's keep working on it. So everything I've found tells you to worry about these guys right here. They break off, but they're very easily, put back on with either a JB weld. I did put some industrial stuff outs over there, but that we could, 2 parts mixed together, resins together, just basically the same material that this is in. But we have a nice flat surface on that side. I don't see any cracks or anything, which we have to make sure when we put it back together that we don't over tighten it, because if we do, she'll be done. And you actually could see there was a little bit of carbon in between these two, so it definitely needed a new gasket. We'll set that aside for a second. And then before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we have to check to see what gasket we have here so that we could put the same one on it. So it's not that one, not that one. It's possibly one of these two right here. I don't know what the difference is between the two of them. Actually, they look almost... Oh, okay, I see. I think this one is this one right here. Yeah, that's the one we're going to want to use, not this one right here. Okay, so we're using this one. That gasket, we can set these two aside. We'll pull the old gasket off this. Actually, I'll be honest with you. This is nowhere near as complicated as I was really thinking it would be. I've always been very, very intimidated by this particular carburetor, so I've never rebuilt it. Not that I think it absolutely needed it, but, don't be intimidated. Just go ahead and do it. Make sure you don't lose any of the little pins or anything, because that would make your life a living hell. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get these things cleaned. We'll have to measure how far these turn in, so we can, when we turn them all the way out, we can put it back all the way in, back it out to where they are. This is in really good shape. There's no real old gasoline. There's a little bit of caked in stuff in there, but it's not like when I pulled apart the Edelbrock that I kind of just toss around now. The internals of it are just corroded to, there's really nothing left of it. So that's why it gets thrown around. But this thing looks fantastic. I really think we just need to do a quick little cleaning. I have a little bit of, different kinds of pipe cleaners so that we can get into the little nooks and crannies. There's a few places where you're going to have to use what they say is a drill bit, like a real small one, and you do it by hand. So we'll see if we can get around that. We have to make sure. I don't really see any glaring problems with this. So I think we're going to just leave it as it is, clean it up, put it back together, and see if we can't get it tuned. So, all right, guys, let's go ahead and finish tearing this down. So the next step is we've gotten almost everything fairly clean. I don't really want to go into the point of it taking a week for me to restore this to like factory new. But I mean, I've gone through and I've cleaned almost everything that I can get my hands on, making sure not to do any undue damage to it. And everything cleaned up very well. I just need to start reassembling it, and we'll actually start that right now. Oh, real quick, pick yourself up some of these Clorox disinfectant wipes. They work really well for cleaning off a lot of the grime. You can actually just get right in there, and if you can't get in there 100%, you can try one of these little pick things and use it to kind of scrub, or you can actually get some of the disinfectant stuff out of the bottom of it and use a Q-tip. That works really well. I don't know what happened to my Q-tips, otherwise I'd show you. But yeah, you get a lot of the grime and gook off of it. That being said, you're going to use a lot of carb cleaner on this thing. I don't see anything really to be concerned about at this point. It's just a matter of reassembling it. So, okay. That's all we got to do. Start putting it back together now. I did forget to install one thing that's very important that we actually take care of right now, and that is this divider here. And the reason why that's so important is because you don't want that thing to be sticking up at all. So you want to take your machinist edge and double check. So that's just something I for some reason forgot. So real quick, put that back in. Now we can continue assembling. Well, guys, I am pleasantly surprised. I learned a very valuable lesson too. There's a few things in cars that I really have always been intimidated by. Transmissions are one of them. But this carburetor has been something that sat in my basement for, actually my garage, for close to 5 years, because I was really intimidated to pull apart a Thermoquad, because everything I've ever read and everything anyone has ever said was they're very complicated, and they are fairly complicated, but they are not nearly as complicated as I was led to believe. It was very simple to pull apart. It was very simple to rebuild. When you put your machine screws back in here, you tighten them evenly in like a star or crossing pattern, just so that you can suck it down without, you know, pulling down one side or the other. There are a few things that you want to make sure you're keeping an eye on while you're doing it, but really it wasn't that bad. Most of the settings given were in pretty good shape already. Like I said, it ran. It had a little bit of an issue, but nothing terrible. So now oh man, I gotta say I'm very excited. Now this one does have a manual choke, so like I was saying, we'll have to add a manual choke into this car. Not a problem. I prefer the manual chokes. The truck was a manual choke, but you know, hey. So really, guys, maybe someday I'll take and try rebuilding a transmission. I think it'll probably blow up, but you know, it's worth just doing it. The worst that could happen is you pull apart the Thermoquad and you have to send it out for rebuild. Well, if you're not going to rebuild it yourself, you're going to send it out anyways. Now, you can send it out to, there's people that will plate everything and make this thing look brand new. It'll all be, you know, beautiful when you get it back. It'll have just, oh, they do look really good. But they're like $500–600 to get them rebuilt and plated. So it was just, you know, go through, clean all the individual parts and pieces. Be very careful when you do that. Remember that all of these individual why can't I think what they're called, but these shafts right here, the linkages, they're bent a specific way for your carburetor. So take pictures of everything before you dismantle it. When you're cleaning these, make sure you don't bend them, because someone already bent them for your carburetor. There are a lot of different ways you can actually get these to be a little bit more effective and not a thermobag, but I'm really hoping we can actually get a little bit of insight with this carburetor in the coming weeks. So that's why I chose this carburetor, so we can learn more about the Thermoquad and not have it be this looming mountain of, you know, intimidation. And it really wasn't that hard to rebuild. It was slightly more difficult than an Averill, but not terrible. Probably as complicated as a Holly. So don't be afraid of rebuilding these. I'm sure a lot of you guys have already rebuilt these things, but I know this thing has intimidated me for a long time. And I'm happy I was able to clean it up. And I have not a huge sentimental attachment to this particular carburetor, but I really like this specific carburetor, and I'm very excited now that I know it's an 850 CFM freaking monster. So yeah, guys, that's all I have for you today. You know, it's not a step-by-step because each one of the Thermoquads are different. Definitely consult your instruction manual when you're dismantling it. Be careful not to damage the resin inside here. There's all kinds of things you can do to get it running a little bit better. And I'm really hoping we learn more about it. So very pleased. Now I did use a gasket primer like stuff. It didn't say you had to, but I've used it in my previous carburetors. So, and I generally use it for most everything, but I don't know, it's just kind of how I was brought up. So anyways, you have yourselves a wonderful day. I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. And today is actually a beautiful day, and we're not even working outside. That's why I'm shooting outside today. But yeah, I try to get this thing as shiny as possible too. Not perfect, but all right, guys, you have yourselves a wonderful day. Keep it shiny side up, and remember, in this crazy time, just have a little bit of humor. I'm trying to add a little bit of humor to my videos. Just, you know, try to be healthy and safe and sane in this crazy time. So God bless, and keep it shiny side up.